My son just turned 2, and I don't think I was prepared for how emotional that milestone would be. Not because of the balloons or the cake or the pictures, not because the party was virtual, but because 2 years ago, I walked into motherhood thinking I understood myself. And I thought I knew my strengths. I thought I knew my limits. I thought I knew what discipline looked like and what resilience looked like, and what love would feel like. And 2 years later, I realized that version of me was strong, but she was also about to be stretched in ways she couldn't anticipate. After the birthday chaos finally settled down, the house got quiet again, I sat on the couch and I stared at the mess. The crumbs on the floor, the Amazon boxes shoved in the corner, toys scattered everywhere, and I had an overwhelming thought. I survived. Not perfectly, not elegantly, not without moments where I questioned myself deeply, but I survived the first 2 years of motherhood. And in surviving them, I changed. There's something about the first 2 years that is unlike anything else. It's constant, it's immersive, it's identity altering, it's beautiful and disorienting at the same time. You are needed in ways that you've probably never been needed before. There is no clocking out, there is no true off switch, and that level of responsibility reveals things about you that you didn't know were there. Hey y'all, I'm Sadie, a dancer, mama, Navy wife, and a woman on a mission to discover who she is after motherhood, after burnout, after seasons that stretched you so far you barely recognize yourself. And this is Becoming Her Again. So today, I want to share what these first 2 years actually taught me. Not the cute Instagram lessons, not the productivity hacks, the real internal identity shifting lessons. Because if you're in this season right now, I want you to know that the changes you're feeling are real and they matter. The first thing motherhood taught me is that I cannot optimize a human being. And I went into this season with structure. I've always been very disciplined. I like knowing that effort produces results. I like systems, I like tracking, I like improvement. So naturally, when I became a mom, I approached it the way I approached everything else, with intention, research, and execution. I read about sleep schedules, I studied feeding rhythms, I tried to create consistency. And for a while, it felt like it was kind of working. There were days where everything lined up and naps happened when they were supposed to. Meals were eaten, but then there were days where nothing worked. Days where he refused to nap. Days where everything I offered him to eat was thrown on the floor. Days where he melted down over something I couldn't logically even solve. And I realized how much my frustration was tied to my expectations that effort should equal outcome. And motherhood disrupts that belief. I couldn't control another human's nervous system. I couldn't engineer perfect days. And that loss of control felt uncomfortable at first. But over time, it softened me. I began to understand that not everything is meant to be optimized. Some seasons are meant to be experienced, and some growth happens in unpredictability. Some lessons come from letting go instead of tightening your grip, and as I loosened my attachment to perfection, I found more presence. Less micromanaging, more observing, and less focusing and more adjusting. Now, the second thing that these 2 years taught me is that my nervous system matters more than my productivity. There were days when the house was clean, my inbox was empty, my tasks were done, and yet by late afternoon, I felt wired and overstimulated. My shoulders were tight, my responses were shorter, my patience was thinner, and I realized something that shifted everything. My son responds to my nervous system more than my efficiency. Toddlers are deeply attuned. If I'm rushed, he senses it. If I'm anxious, he mirrors it. If I'm calm, he often softens. And that realization forced me to change the way I evaluate my days. Instead of asking, what did I accomplish? I started asking, how regulated was I? Did I pause before reacting? Did I eat enough? Did I take a breath? Did I give myself 5 minutes alone when I felt overstimulated? Because a regulated mother is more impactful than a productive one. And that was really hard for me to admit. I was used to deriving confidence from output, from results, from visible progress. But motherhood made much of my growth invisible, and that invisibility forced me to build confidence internally instead of externally. Now, the third lesson was one of the hardest to articulate. You can love your child deeply and still grieve who you used to be. No one really talks about that part. The quiet moments where you miss that version of who you were, who could leave the house without planning. The version of you who had uninterrupted mornings. The version of you who didn't have to think about snacks or nap timing or bedtime routines. I remember feeling that grief and immediately judging myself for it. I thought something must be wrong with me if I missed any part of my old life. But grief and gratitude can coexist. Missing your independence does not mean that you regret motherhood. It means that you are integrating a major identity shift. You are layering new responsibilities on top of an existing self, and the layering takes time to reconcile. I had to give myself permission to hold two truths at once. I love being a mom, and I sometimes miss who I was before this season. And those truths do not cancel each other out. They make me human. And that's something motherhood has taught me over and over again. Humanity over performance, complexity over simplicity, layers over labels. And 2 years in, I no longer feel like I need to justify the mixed emotions. I no longer feel like I need to look perfectly adjusted. I understand that growth feels disorienting before it feels overpowering. And the first 2 years are full of disorientation, okay? Motherhood didn't erase me, it expanded me. It forced me to look at parts of myself that were rigid, parts that were overly attached to control, parts that equated worth with productivity. And in being stretched, I became more aware, more reflective, more intentional. And this is only the beginning. Now, the fourth thing that motherhood taught me is that exhaustion changes your personality more than you think. Before becoming a mom, I thought I understood tired. You don't, okay? I had pulled late nights, I had pushed through busy seasons, I had trained through fatigue. But this kind of tired is different. It is cumulative. It is unpredictable. It is emotional. It is waking up in the middle of the night, not knowing how long you've been awake, then functioning the next day like nothing ever happened. And what surprised me most wasn't the physical exhaustion, it was how exhaustion altered my perception. On low sleep days, small problems felt larger, neutral tones felt critical, and minor setbacks felt catastrophic. I noticed how quickly my internal voice would turn sharp when I was depleted. You should handle that better. Why are you being so impatient? Other moms are doing this more gracefully. But over time, I realized something important. Exhaustion shrinks capacity. And when capacity shrinks, expectations must adjust. And that realization sounds simple, but it took me a while to embody it. I had to stop holding myself to the same emotional standards on 5 hours of broken up sleep that I held myself to when I was fully rested. There were nights that I would lie in bed, staring at the monitor, feeling like I was unraveling, not because I didn't love my son, but because constant responsibility combined with minimal rest reveals the edges of your resilience. And instead of judging those edges, I learned to respect them. Low sleep equals lower standards. Fewer decisions equal more grace. And the shift alone protected me from the spiraling to unnecessary shame. Now, the fifth thing that I've learned is that love does not cancel overwhelm. I think there's this quiet narrative that if you love something enough, it should feel lighter. But love and overwhelm coexist constantly in motherhood. And I can adore my son and still feel overwhelmed. I can feel grateful and still crave space. I can feel fulfilled and still need silence. And the moment I stopped trying to eliminate one emotion with the other, I felt more stable. And there's a specific afternoon that stands out. It was loud, toys were everywhere. Koa was in that phase where everything is a negotiation. I hadn't had a moment alone all day, and I can feel my nervous system tightening. And in the middle of that, I had this split-second awareness. I love him so freaking much. And I am overwhelmed right now. Both were true at the same time. And before motherhood, I would have tried to cancel the overwhelm with gratitude. You're so lucky. Don't complain. But that kind of emotional suppression builds resentment quietly. Instead, I started allowing layered emotions. I can be grateful and tired. I can be fulfilled and frustrated. I can be strong and stretched thin. That emotional honesty made me more regulated, not less. And the sixth thing that these 2 years have taught me is that you cannot perform motherhood long term. There is a subtle pressure sometimes externally, sometimes internally, to appear like you're handling everything so smoothly, to bounce back physically, to stay productive, to keep the house in order, to maintain your identity exactly as it was. And for a while, I tried to meet that pressure. I tried to prove that I could keep everything moving at the same time, just like before, at the same pace. But motherhood exposes performance real quick. You cannot fake patience for long. You cannot fake energy indefinitely, and you cannot fake balance without eventually feeling the cracks. And I remember the moment when I realized I was trying to look like I had it all together instead of actually building support for myself. And that was quite humbling, okay? Because performance is exhausting, presence is grounding, and I had to choose which one I wanted to build my identity around. Did I want to look capable, or did I want to feel steady? And those are not always the same thing. Now, the seventh thing motherhood made louder is comparison. And comparison has always existed, but early motherhood really amplified it. Milestones, development, speech, sleep, fitness, work progress, you name it. It is so easy to look sideways and measure yourself against someone else's timeline. And when you're already vulnerable, physically changed, emotionally stretched, mentally recalibrating, comparison can feel like confirmation that you are behind. And I remember scrolling late at night and feeling the similar tightening in my chest. She's further along. She looks more put together. Her toddler is already doing that. it didn't matter if I was rational, it just felt real in that moment. But comparison only thrives when you forget your context. Every child is different. Every support system is different. Every marriage is different. Every nervous system is different. And when I brought my focus back to my lane, my child, my rhythm, my capacity, something softened. Peace grows where focus goes, okay? And I realized that measuring my motherhood against someone else's highlight reel was not only unfair, it was unnecessary. Now, the eighth lesson began slowly, but grew louder over time. I did not lose myself in motherhood. I began reconstructing myself. There were moments where I genuinely thought, I don't feel like me anymore. But the more I sat with that statement, the more I understood that it wasn't loss. It was evolving, right? The old version of me was built for a different season. She thrived on speed, output, visible progress, but this new season required patience, repetition, and internal grounding. Motherhood stripped away some of the external reinforcement I was used to. There was no applause moment for keeping your toddler alive and loved. There's no performance reviews for regulating your tone. And much of the growth is invisible. And when your identity has been built partly on visible achievement, the invisibility can feel destabilizing. But invisibility can also be refining. It forced me to examine what I valued about myself. Was it my productivity, my discipline, my ability to push through, or was it my capacity to love consistently, repair quickly, and stay grounded when things didn't go as planned? 2 years in, I can see how much reconstruction has happened quietly. I respond differently. I pace myself differently. I define strength differently. And while there were moments I felt like I was disappearing, what was actually happening was rebuilding. And motherhood did not erase me. It expanded me. It exposed perfectionism and invited comparison, and it exposed how much I equaled movement with value and invited stillness instead. And that expansion has been uncomfortable at times, and growth usually is, but it has also been deeply grounding. Now, the ninth thing that the first 2 years have taught me is that small wins matter more than dramatic milestones. Before motherhood, I was wired for momentum. I liked measurable progress. I liked visible improvement. I liked leaps, but early motherhood is not a season of leaps. It's a season of repetition. And the same bedtime routine, the same snacks, the same books, all read over and over again. The same lessons taught through patience instead of lectures. And at first, that repetition felt like stagnation. Like I remember thinking, am I even growing? Am I moving forward? Or am I just surviving here? Because nothing about this season felt glamorous. Nothing, okay? There were no big achievements to announce, no dramatic transformations to showcase, just daily, quiet consistency. But over time, I began to notice something subtle. The repetition was shaping me. The first time I paused instead of snapping, the first time I walked away to regulate instead of escalating, the first time I apologized to my toddler and meant it. Those were small moments, almost invisible, but they compounded. There was one particular evening that I remember clearly. Koa was tired. I was tired. Everything felt louder than it actually was, and I snapped. Not in a very dramatic way, but just in a very sharp tone, enough for me to see his face change, and enough to feel that immediate drop in my chest. The old me would have spiraled there. You're failing, you're messing this up, you should know better. But 2 years in, something different happened. I took a deep breath. I knelt down and I said, I'm sorry. Mama's voice was too loud, and I'm working on it. And that moment mattered more than a perfectly regulated day ever could have. Because repair builds trust more than perfection builds image. And that is something motherhood really taught me deeply. Perfection is not a goal. Repair is. And repair requires humility. It requires presence. It requires willingness to admit when you misstepped. And that is strength in the way I didn't understand before, which leads to the 10th and final lesson. Strength looks different now. Before motherhood, strength meant discipline. It meant consistency. It meant pushing through discomfort. It meant proving that I could handle things, and I equaled strength with endurance and output. Now, strength looks like something entirely different. Strength looks like pausing before reacting. Strength looks like leaving the dishes in the sink because rest matters more. Strength looks like asking for help without framing it as failure. Strength looks like saying no without apologizing for it. Strength looks like slowing down with everything in you wants to speed up. Strength looks like rebuilding your body patiently instead of punishing it. And strength looks like redefining productivity. Motherhood dismantled my old definition of strength and rebuilt it into something steadier. And steady is so powerful. Steady doesn't need applause. Steady doesn't need constant validation. Steady doesn't need to perform. Steady just needs to show up again and again. And when I look back at the woman I was 2 years ago, I see someone ambitious and capable and determined. But I also see someone who believed control created safety. Someone who believed productivity equaled worth. Someone who thought strength had to look impressive. And 2 years in, I understand something different. Safety comes from regulation, not control. Worth comes from presence, not productivity. Strength comes from steadiness, not spectacle. The first 2 years did not just shape my child, it shaped me. They stretched my patience. They humbled my ego. They exposed my attachment to speed and invited slowness instead. They showed me where I was rigid and where I needed softness. And becoming has been quieter than I expected. It's not dramatic, it's not flashy, it's not perfectly curated. It's layered, it's messy, and it's human. There were moments I felt like I was disappearing, but what was actually happening was integration. The old version of me wasn't being erased, she was being expanded. Disciplined and soft, driven and grounded, strong and reflective. Motherhood didn't take my identity away, it deepened it. If you are in the thick of early motherhood right now and you feel stretched or unsure or like you don't quite recognize yourself anymore, I want you to hear this very clearly. You are not lost. You are becoming. Becoming is not linear. It doesn't feel polished. It doesn't always feel empowering in the moment. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion and doubt and repetition. But repetition builds depth, and depth builds steadiness. And steadiness builds confidence that does not need consistent reinforcement. 2 years in, and I don't feel like I have everything figured out. I don't feel like I've mastered anything, but I do feel grounded in a way I wasn't before. Less reactive, less attached to proving, more connected to presence. And that to me feels like growth. So if you're measuring your progress only by big milestones, I want to invite you to look closer. Look at the small pauses, the repairs, the boundaries, the quiet resilience. Those are the moments building you. the first 2 years are not just about raising a child. They are about being reshaped yourself. And if I've learned anything, it's this: I am stronger than I thought. Not because I did everything right, but because I kept showing up through exhaustion, through identity shifts, through doubt, through growth. And if you're here still showing up in your own season of becoming, you are stronger than you think too. That's why I remind you of that after every episode. If you're a mom, I would genuinely love to know what motherhood has taught you so far. And if you're in any season of identity shift, which part of this really resonated with you the most? I want to talk about it in the comments below. And of course, if you are still here, be sure to like, subscribe to this channel if you want more content like this, and comment this emoji just so I know that you stayed till the end. But of course, as always, you are, and so am I, stronger than you think.